In 1789, George Washington became the first president of the United States. Since then, the White House has seen brilliant speakers, tough generals, reformers, dreamers, pragmatists, and political heavyweights. Their decisions shaped history, influenced wars and economies, and affected the lives of millions. But behind the speeches, elections, and historic photographs, there was always another side to their lives, a far more human one. They are families. Some presidents grew up in huge families, while others became fathers of many children themselves. And then there was James Polk, who never had children at all. Historians believe a serious surgery he underwent as a teenager may have left him infertile. George H.W. Bush entered the White House as the 41st president, while his son, George W. Bush, later became the 43rd. A similar story happened at the dawn of American history. John Adams became the second president of the United States, while his son, John Quincy Adams, later became the sixth. For many years, America also saw a long line of presidents with only daughters: Clinton, Bush, and Obama. Then Donald Trump broke that streak, although Ivanka still seems to be his favorite. Now I want to take a closer look at how many children U.S. presidents had, because this personal side of their lives often reveals as much about them as their political victories. Since official adoption only became legal in the United States in 1851, to avoid confusion, we'll count only known biological children. Foster and officially adopted children will be mentioned separately, but not included in the totals. Let's begin with the presidents who had no biological children at all. Here is this unusual childless five of the White House. George Washington, no biological children, but he raised Martha Washington's two children from her previous marriage, along with several grandchildren and relatives. In some cases, health problems may have played a role. Historians, for example, believe that George Washington's bout with tuberculosis may have affected his ability to have children. James Madison, no children, helped raise one stepson. Andrew Jackson, no biological children, raised two adopted sons, including a Native American boy named Lincoln from the Creek tribe. James K. Polk had no children, possibly because of a major surgery he underwent as a teenager without anesthesia. James Buchanan, the only U.S. president who never married, though he raised two nieces and one nephew. Presidents with 1 to 3 children. Some presidents had only one biological child, like Harry Truman, whose daughter Margaret later became a well-known public figure herself. Warren Harding had one stepchild and one biological daughter. DNA testing confirmed this in 2015. Bill Clinton's only daughter, Chelsea, grew up in front of the entire country during her father's presidency in the 1990s. She largely stayed away from major scandals, although critics often claimed her prestigious media and corporate positions were helped by the Clinton name. The more children a president had, the richer, and often more dramatic, the family story became. Millard Fillmore's daughter Mary was considered one of the best educated and most musically gifted young women of her time, but she died young. His son served during the Civil War, never married, and dedicated his life to preserving the family legacy, effectively ending the direct Fillmore line. William McKinley had one of the most tragic family stories of any president. One daughter died of typhoid fever at age 3, while another passed away only 5 months after birth. The couple never fully recovered from the loss. McKinley's wife, Ida, later developed epilepsy, and they never had more children. One of Calvin Coolidge's sons, Calvin Coolidge Jr., died tragically at 16 during his father's presidency. What began as a simple blister from playing tennis turned into a deadly blood infection. The tragedy deeply changed Coolidge and became one of the greatest sorrows of his life. Both Herbert Hoover and Dwight Eisenhower had 2 sons. Unlike many presidential families, Those are largely free from major scandals or tragedies and were often considered among the calmest families to live in the White House. The daughters of Lyndon Johnson, Richard Nixon, George W. Bush, and Barack Obama grew up beside the White House and matured under the eyes of the nation. Despite intense media attention and life constantly under cameras, these families largely avoided major scandals and devastating tragedies. From Lyndon and Lucy Johnson to Malia and Sasha Obama, they became part of the unique legacy of White House daughters in American political memory. 6 presidents had 3 children. Another deeply tragic story belonged to the Franklin Pierce family. 2 of his sons died in infancy, and Pierce began to fear that God did not want him involved in politics. He even considered leaving public life, but in 1853, he still became president of the United States. Then the family's worst fears came true. Their only surviving child, 11-year-old Benny, was killed in a train accident right in front of his parents. The family never truly recovered from that loss. James Monroe also endured painful family losses. One daughter died young, while another struggled with health problems for years. Woodrow Wilson had 3 daughters, and the White House during his presidency often resembled a high society family salon. One daughter even secretly married during his presidency, causing a media sensation. The family of Benjamin Harrison also faced personal tragedy when the First Lady became gravely ill and died inside the White House, while the children watched the ordeal unfold before the nation. Meanwhile, family life for William Howard Taft and Chester Arthur was somewhat calmer. Although Arthur's wife died young, leaving a deep emotional mark on the family. 4 to 6 children. John Quincy Adams had 4 sons. One died young from alcoholism. Another struggled with mental illness. And only the eldest managed to build a relatively successful political career. Abraham Lincoln also raised 4 sons. 3 of them died before their father. Lincoln was especially devastated by the death of his 11-year-old son Willie, who died during his presidency. The families of Ulysses Grant, Gerald Ford, and Jimmy Carter, each of whom raised 3 sons and 1 daughter, are often remembered as some of the warmest and closest presidential families in American history. Despite the enormous pressures of political life, these presidents managed to raise their children in an atmosphere of rare family warmth and stability. But perhaps no presidential family captured America's affection quite like the family of John F. Kennedy. The glamorous Jacqueline Kennedy, along with little Caroline and John Jr., grew up before the eyes of the nation and became true American favorites. Yet behind this bright and seemingly perfect family image was deep tragedy. The Kennedys lost 2 children in infancy. Family life inside the home of Ronald Reagan, who raised 2 sons, 2 daughters, and 1 adopted son, was also far from simple. One of the greatest family struggles was Reagan's long-running conflict with his daughter Patty Davis, who publicly criticized both her father and his conservative politics. She later spoke openly about the tensions inside the family. The family story of Joe Biden became one of the most tragic among modern American presidents. His first wife and young daughter were killed in a car accident, and decades later his son Beau Biden died from brain cancer. Now let's move on to presidential families who raised, believe it or not, 5 children. Andrew Johnson had 3 sons and 2 daughters. 2 of his sons died young, losses that Johnson took especially hard. Grover Cleveland's private life was surrounded for years by rumors of an illegitimate child, one of the biggest political scandals of the 19th century. Officially, he raised 3 daughters and 2 sons. As for Donald Trump, there's probably little left to add. You already know him well. 5 children from 3 marriages, with nearly all of them heavily involved in the family business and political life, turning the Trumps into one of the most public and talked about presidential families in modern America. Interestingly, Once presidential families reached 6 children, they often began to resemble full political dynasties. From the families of John Adams, Theodore Roosevelt, Franklin D. Roosevelt, and George W. Bush came future senators, governors, diplomats, and even more presidents. At the same time, nearly all of these families combined enormous public attention with deep personal tragedies. The children of Theodore Roosevelt lived dramatic and often scandal-filled lives, and Alice Roosevelt Longworth alone became a legendary princess of Washington. The family of Franklin D. Roosevelt lived for decades under constant media attention because of complicated relationships inside the family. Barbara Bush later recalled that after the death of her young daughter, her hair began turning gray almost overnight. The Bush family story also carried its share of personal heartbreak, despite their image as one of America's strongest political dynasties. Zachary Taylor's 16-month presidency gave rise to many rumors about his possible poisoning, while epidemics claimed the lives of 3 of his young daughters. Martin Van Buren, the only U.S. president whose first language was not English, raised 6 children who later supported his political career, and after the early death of his wife, he never remarried. 7 or more children. James Garfield had 7 children. The Garfield family was considered one of the warmest and most loving families ever to live in the White House, and Garfield himself was famously devoted to his children. After Garfield's assassination, the entire country watched with sympathy as his widow and large family struggled through the tragedy. The White House under Rutherford Hayes often felt more like a lively family home filled with children, pets, and constant activity, very different from the more formal presidential households of that era. The 19th president raised 8 children. Did you know that William Henry Harrison had 10 children? His enormous family eventually became an entire political dynasty, producing congressmen, senators, and even another U.S. president. Benjamin Harrison, the 23rd president, was his grandson. Among all American presidents, John Tyler had the largest family of all, 15 children from 2 marriages, 8 sons and 7 daughters. Tyler once joked that he simply enjoyed being a father. His family became so enormous that Tyler's direct descendants are still alive in the 21st century, even though the president himself was born in the 18th century. He had 45 grandchildren born between 1836 and 1931. Nearly an entire century apart. Some cousins in the Tyler family were separated in age by as much as 95 years. And yet, among all U.S. presidents, the record for the greatest number of grandchildren belongs to William Henry Harrison, 46. Overall, America's presidents fathered more than 150 children, around 90 boys and 62 girls. Many presidential children went on to build careers of their own, becoming politicians, military officers, diplomats, businessmen, doctors, writers, and public figures. Around 20 presidential sons worked alongside their fathers in the White House, while 7 presidential daughters unofficially served as hostesses of the White House, greeting guests, organizing receptions, and entertaining visitors. Not every presidential child managed to handle the burden of a famous last name. Some struggled with alcoholism, severe emotional breakdowns, and even tragic deaths. After one of her sons died by suicide and another died from alcoholism and cirrhosis, the wife of John Quincy Adams bitterly said, "Another son sacrificed on the altar of politics." The stories of presidential families remind us that even the most powerful people in America experience the same joys, tragedies, and family dramas as millions of ordinary Americans. So which fact surprised you the most? Write it in the comments. I'd really love to hear your thoughts. And if you enjoyed this journey through the family history of the White House, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. That's the real engine of YouTube. And thank you for watching.